Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Today we're going to be talking about living in Western Pennsylvania. So I live in Pennsylvania, but technically it's not a state, it's a commonwealth. Commonwealth actually denotes that it's really a focus on the commonwealth of the citizens of Pennsylvania. So it's a little different than the other states, also known as the Keystone State. If you think about it, we're almost like a piece of a puzzle. The Keystone State kind of interlocks all the states, all the surrounding states by us. So, Ohio, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, things like that. So a lot of people call us the Keystone State. Very few people call us a commonwealth, but mostly Pennsylvania is a state known by all, but technically I just wanted to say it was a commonwealth. But so I lived here my whole life, and there's so many things to talk about in Western Pennsylvania. You know, I come from a small town called Monessen in Western Pennsylvania. I want to say it's about 30 miles south of Pittsburgh. We do have the four seasons. So winter is pretty harsh here. Summer is very hot here, especially July and August. And, fall is pretty much fall is probably most liked around here just because of the football season and probably the leaves changing and just the overall scenery of Western Pennsylvania. The further you go up north towards like Erie and things like that, the leaves will change a little sooner than southern Western Pennsylvania, but for the most part, the leaves are pretty beautiful, especially in the fall, and a lot of people like that. In fact, I think up in Clarion County, they have some type of fall leaf festival that you can go to, so a lot of people migrate there. I've been there during that time doing some work, and there are a lot of people up there, so people definitely do like to live in Pennsylvania, probably just because of the four seasons. There's a lot of other things that you could do in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of rivers and lakes and stuff like that you can go fishing, and you can go swimming in the rivers or the lakes. There's no beaches here. The closest beach, actual beach, is probably Ocean City, Maryland, or something like that. Through Maryland or New Jersey. You could have a beach up near the lake. On the lake, Lake Erie, which is probably 2 to 3 hours away, but that's technically not a beach. But living in Western Pennsylvania brings a lot of its advantages too. Some of the advantages that you could do is you could actually hit like all the tri-state area. So if you wanted to hit like Ohio, Maryland, West Virginia, we're really close to those states that you could hit all those in a day. So practically, you could probably go and check off a lot of those states that you visited just within a half a day. There are some other things to do down in southern Western Pennsylvania. West Virginia is really big. Morgantown's not that far away from us, so you can go down there and visit, and you could go to downtown Pittsburgh as well. Downtown Pittsburgh is a place to be, year round, I would say. There's always something to do down there, whether it's the cultural district or whether it's the Three Rivers or sporting events, there's always something to do. But mostly living in Western Pennsylvania is you'll notice you'll go from summer to winter fairly quick. You could have your furnace on and then you can go straight to air condition within like a couple of days. That's just about how it goes here. And you could do the opposite. You can go from air conditioned to furnace within a couple of days as well, like in autumn especially. But one of the things that I like probably most in Western Pennsylvania is cutting the grass. People that know me know that I love to cut grass, especially my own grass. I really take care of it. I get it fertilized. I used to do it myself, but now I have a spring green company come in, and it's the only company that uses Lesco fert. And if you know anything about fert, Lesco is the best. They use that on golf courses, and they use it professionally, as a matter of fact. And that's probably the best fertilizer you can get for your grass. In fact, I even used a Lesco grass seed. And back in the day, I used to replant my yard, every couple of years, and I'd just overseed. But now I haven't done that in a while, but I use this 50-50 mix of Lesco blend, and it's really good. I mean, it's really tolerant to all the weather we have here in the northern states. But you could practically cut grass year-round in Pennsylvania, I would say. I'd take probably 2 to 3 months off. Probably December, January, February I'll take off. And then, March through Thanksgiving, I'm definitely cutting grass, because my grass just grows and grows and grows, with that special grass seed and lawn fert. Man, you can't beat it. That is some good stuff. And, I always get neighbors come around saying, how do you get your grass so green? Why is it so green? I'm like, and I tell them, but they don't really understand the mix and the whole seed and the whole fertilizer spray that you use. I've used Lesco for years and years and years, and it takes a long time for your grass to look its best. And I put a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears into that grass. I remember cultivating it, and I remember planting it, and I remember, putting some starter fert. And I've used mushroom manure too. So, a lot of TLC's gone into the grass. But that's one of the main things that I love about Western Pennsylvania is you can get green grass. Now, sometimes it does go brown when we get into a drought, say July and August. Last year, not so much. 2018 brought the most rain, probably in the Pittsburgh area in probably the last, 100 years. I think we set records in 2018 for the most moisture in a year. So my grass was looking awesome the whole year. But there's been times when we had droughts. There's been times when we went 3 months without rain. I can remember a few years back, I saw rain, I think, around Memorial Day, and I didn't see it until like late July. So there are droughts here where you'll have to water your grass, but usually I don't water it unless it gets really, really bad. But my grass is pretty hardy. It could take it, and then it comes right back, in the fall. So you could probably say my grass looks the best in I'll say November, and then it looks the best in like April. June, July, and August, whenever the drought comes, it still looks really good, but not as good like in the early spring and late fall. That's a lot to say for the grass around the area, and that's I think it's just a fertilizer, like just a lot of farming area down here in Western Pennsylvania. A lot of it's grown out though. A lot of farmers are selling their land for new construction for single family homes and things like that. But a lot of the farmers are just going by the wayside. But there's a lot of other downsides of living in Pennsylvania as well. Some things that come to mind are traveling on a toll road, like a turnpike. It seems like every couple of years a turnpike is just going up and up in price, and and it only affects like Pennsylvanians. I travel a lot to Ohio and other states, and I swear their tolls are like a third of the price in Pennsylvania. So I don't know what's going on in Pennsylvania, but man, their tolls are the highest. Ohio, not so much. I could probably travel 3 hours into Ohio, 3 hours back, and it'll cost me like $4. If I travel 6 hours on a Pennsylvania turnpike, it's probably going to cost at least $20. And, it goes up every 2 years. So, as time flies, every 2 years comes around pretty quick. And another, drawback of Pennsylvania is the gas. I have to say, living in Western Pennsylvania with the gas prices, we are the most heavily taxed here. And just because of the location of where we're at, the gas pipeline and all that, we pay a pretty hefty price. And we are definitely more than a national average of what it is. I'm not sure what it is now. But we usually are, at least 25 to 30 cents higher than the rest of the country just because of the state taxes and stuff like that. So those are a couple drawbacks. But there are, good things about living in Pennsylvania as well, too. I'd like to cover everything, but, I don't have that much time in this podcast to talk about all the ups and downs of Pennsylvania. But some of the good things in Pennsylvania is the tax on necessities like clothes and groceries and things like that, you don't have to pay taxes if you're buying clothes or shoes. The necessities, you don't have to pay taxes. Other states you do. California comes to mind where anything you buy, you're going to get taxed. But here in Pennsylvania, on groceries, shoes, clothing, the essentials, like I said, you're not going to pay tax. But some of the other stuff you do. if you're buying beer or wine, you're going to get taxed on that. Speaking of speaking of beer and wine other states you go to a long, long time ago, you used to be able to buy that stuff in like a gas station and like a convenience store. And I was always amazed going out of state and seeing that stuff in a convenience store and going, man, Pennsylvania's behind the times because, for a long time, we never had beer and wine sold in convenience stores or gas stations or 7-Elevens or things like that. Only recently, within the past few years, we started that. We still have what's known as wine and spirit stores, and we have beer distributors, which is really odd to a lot of folks outside of the state of Pennsylvania. I could remember going out of state with some of my buddies, especially in Maryland, saying, hey, we got to make a beer run. Where's the closest distributor? And they're looking at me like I'm talking in a different language. They're like, Beef, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, where's the closest beer distributor? We're getting low. He's like, we have a market down the road where we can go buy beer if you want. I'm like, a market? What do you mean, like a supermarket? They're like, yeah, dude, we can buy the stuff in a supermarket here. I'm like, wow, I'm no longer in Pennsylvania. That's pretty funny, but I got used to it over the years. So no matter what state I'm in, I try to use the right language. It's just the nature of the beast. Wherever you are, you try to act like you've been there before. In a lot of aspects, Pennsylvania is behind the times. Those are just a couple reasons why I put that on the downside is because of the beer and wine just wasn't sold all over the state in those type of stores. You had to go to specialty stores to get that. But, we very rarely have natural disasters here as well. I mean, we do get your floodings. We do get maybe a few tornadoes. But yes, earthquakes we do. We've had a few earthquakes, and I can remember a couple times I was involved in an earthquake. Maybe the first time, I'm not sure if it was an earthquake, but I was in grade school, I'll say second or third grade, and I was at Holy Name School when I remember the building shaking. So I was probably early 70s, I don't know, 71 or 72, and I'm like, whoa, what is that? I remember being excused. I had to go to the office for something, and I'm walking down the steps, and all of a sudden there's a big explosion, what seemed like an explosion. The building shook, and the radiators were shaking. And I'm like, what is that, man? The radiator in the school is either like losing steam or it's firing up or what happened. I don't even know, but I just went on about my day and nobody really said anything because, there was no news out there that came to your phone that told you in the early 70s. So you just went about your day. And I remember going home and, watching the news, and I heard that they had a Coke plant explosion down at the mill, and I thought it was an earthquake. So I wasn't really sure if I was in an earthquake or an explosion or what, but found out, from what I understand, it was a Coke plant explosion, and it shook a lot of buildings in the area. We were a few miles away from the mill, but that's what I thought. I went through my first earthquake, but I'm not so sure that was it. And probably the most recent earthquake I was in Pennsylvania, that is. I've been in an earthquake in California, but in Pennsylvania, I can remember years and years, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I was at work at Walgreens in Carnegie, and the building started to shake. However, where I was sitting at in my office, it didn't shake. So there was about 4 or 5 of us around our cubicles and offices, and we didn't feel anything, but we saw the rest of the group of people just get up and walk out. And I looked around and I'm like, what are they doing? And everyone's like, I'm out, see ya. I'm like, what are they doing? And then a few minutes later, they came over and says, did you guys feel the earthquake? They're evacuating. I'm like, no, I didn't feel the earthquake. Well, we evacuated the building and we went back in. And after talking to the people that owned the building, because the inspectors had to come in, they told us we were in a very insulated spot in the building, me and my coworkers, where the building didn't shake. It kind of was insulated from all that. It was kind of secure. So that part of the building didn't shake. So it looked like probably 90% of the building felt the earthquake, but I didn't. So I can't really say that I was in the earthquake, but I saw everybody scrambling and leaving. And I thought that was really interesting. And later I found out that it was, I don't know if it was a 2.5 or 3.0 earthquake, but some of that stuff is very rare in Pennsylvania. I mean, we do get blizzards. I mean, don't get me wrong, blizzards, those are pretty bad here. And they can come as early as or as late as March. Some of our worst blizzards we've had in March. I can remember, the blizzard of '92, and man, we must have had 2 feet of snow, and it just dumped and dumped for days. And I think it was declared like Pittsburgh was, or the whole state of Pennsylvania was just declared a national disaster by the governor. So nobody was allowed on the roads if you could help it and things like that. Although I did manage to go to Denny's for a free breakfast for my birthday. So yeah, March 13th, 1992, I did make it to Denny's, and not many people were there, but I got my free breakfast. That's probably what people remember most about that is the snow of '92 or the blizzard of '92. But I remember it being on my birthday and going to Denny's and digging myself out and getting my free breakfast, which I thought that was pretty funny. But, earlier I was talking about meals, and Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh specifically, was huge for making steel. So there was mills around the surrounding areas, but Pittsburgh was on the bombing list back in probably the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Take out Pittsburgh, no more steel for the rest of the country. So I'm sure we were on a lot of hit lists for other world wars. After the First and Second War, they're like, well, we're getting a little smarter. We could blow up Pittsburgh. There'd be no more steel for the rest of the country. So we did live with that. I don't know if we lived in fear of that for a while, but it was always in the back of your mind thinking about that. But it never got to that, thank God. But so Pittsburgh was known for steel back then, until China started making it cheaper and stuff like that. And then we started outsourcing it. So we do still have some mills around the area. But it's nowhere near, what it was in the 70s from what I remember, and even the early 80s, nowhere near that. The coming from Pennsylvania, coming from Pittsburgh specifically, there are a lot of Pittsburghese speak around here. So you can't talk about Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania you can't not talk about just how we say some of the words we do. We have a different language, I think, other than around the country. Part of it is, first of all, whenever I go someplace, I have to say Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I just can't go and say Pittsburgh, PA, or Pittsburgh, because there's Pittsburghs in Kansas City, there's Pittsburgh in California. They don't have the H at the end of it. They just eliminated the H. So I do have to say Pennsylvania. If I say PA, they just don't get it, because a lot of places don't say, hey, I'm from VA, like for Virginia, or hey, I'm from CA, California, or I'm from MI, or I'm from FL, So people tend to say PA around here, which isn't really nationally known. So I have to say Pennsylvania, or they just really don't know where I'm coming from. But, some of the words that I could think of, just off the top of my head is, yinzers. Everybody calls us yinzers. You talk about yinzers, you talk about phrases, you talk about words, and even languages. Some of the words that come off the top of my head is like yuns and sweepers and like red up your room and stuff like that. A more famous one is probably called jagoffs. A lot of people are called jagoffs here, but you go someplace else, they have no idea what you're talking about. So I always thought that was pretty cool. Some of the lunch meats we talk about, like jumbo, that's not really accepted across the country. And lunch meat isn't even accepted across the country. Cold cuts. People call them cold cuts, not lunch meat. Another huge one is pop. People say soda pop. Some people say soda. But Pittsburgh people, Western Pennsylvania, say pop. And they won't change their ways. They will definitely keep saying pop until the day they die. It's just something that you grew up on. And, something you'll always say. And I don't know if the people who moved away from Pennsylvania say that now. They may have moved to other states and adopted another saying for pop. But, some people still live here that always lived here, never moved out of their city, will still say pop. Some of the other words or phrases that I think are pretty funny is like, it's slippy outside. What in the world is slippy? Or I'm running the sweeper. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about, sweeper? That's a vacuum. A lot of people, I know what a sweeper is, but a lot of people that I work with or run into that aren't from, here, that are going to Pittsburgh, like Pitt, university, they've never heard of these Pittsburgh words, like buggy instead of carts for grocery stores. Gum bands is another good one. There's some other ones that like to put S's at the end of it. Like they'll be like, I'm going to Walmart's and at. We always use an at for that. Giant Eagles with an S, Giant Eagles. Stuff like that I think is really funny. And I want to say Kennywood. A lot of people know of Kennywood, but a lot of people don't know that if they're pointing at you and saying Kennywood's open, a lot of people don't know what that means. So the people out there that don't know what Kennywood open means is that means your fly's down. Yeah, that's something to get used to. Kennywood is open on a certain day. I want to say it's around Memorial Day, but if somebody says Kennywood's open in December, you better look at your fly. So I think that's pretty funny. There's a software company that I don't work for them, but I do quite a bit of research for them. They're called Framework. That's a software company that we use at my work now, where I work, and a lot of people, being from Pittsburgh, and the company is from Pittsburgh. But it's called Framework LTC. It's just a long-term care software that you use for filling prescriptions. But everybody in Pittsburgh, 95% of the people say Frameworks with an S. They're like, my Frameworks is down. I'm like, how many frameworks do you have? It's Framework, not Frameworks. So I always make a point to say Framework. But, I try to start a trend to have everybody do that, but people just love putting S at the end of it. And, I will say one other last thing with Pittsburgh is they do have a certain style. And just by saying style, I'll mean like if you order a salad Pittsburgh style, you're going to get fries on it. So that's a Pittsburgh style sandwich. Or if you get a Pittsburgh style salad, you're going to have fries on it. So if you even get a hoagie, Grinders. Well, Grinders is more out towards Philly. Hoagies is here around Pittsburgh. It's kind of like a convenience store too. Like Wawa's is out east and Sheetz is out west and things like that. So Pittsburgh has hoagies, Philly has Grinders, and Philly's has growlers, like when you fill beers and stuff. So definitely that mountain in between Central PA definitely divides the state. Once you hit Harrisburg and you go across that river, you definitely get, east and west. And it's a different type of language. We're all still the same Commonwealth, but it's different types of language. And, if you read a lot online or if you read a lot on the internet, Pennsylvania in general, Pittsburgh gets a lot of ink, and Philadelphia does as well. And sometimes Philadelphia gets a lot more bad press than Pittsburgh, just because it's a bigger city, just bigger overall in general crime rate and things like that. Just being, coming from a bigger city and more people. But definitely there's a lot of traffic in Philly. I've worked in Philly for a few years and I've been there a while. I still go back there a little bit, but, traffic is pretty bad there, but traffic is bad in Pittsburgh too. Come on. Some of the things that you don't want to run into in Pittsburgh here is bridges and tunnels. There's just so many of them. Everybody breaks at a tunnel just because you don't know if cops are around there, if you don't know your car will fit in a tunnel, or if you're just overall scared of tight spaces and you don't want to cross the yellow line. And people just tend to brake going into a tunnel, whether they're claustrophobic or not. But it's just a tendency that people get. So that just backs up traffic for miles and miles and miles. And the bridges are the same way too. A lot of people cross bridges, then you got to cross lanes, and then, they got big trucks to deal with. So traffic is pretty bad. I think I saw a stat maybe just a week or so ago, and we are in the top 10. I want to say number 7 overall in the country in traffic. And you wouldn't think about that, but we are. And I think it is due to the bridges and the tunnels. It's just lined up no matter where you go. I don't know how many bridges are in Pittsburgh, but I think we set a record and all that. And it goes in conjunction with the potholes as well. So with all the different weather changes we have here in Pennsylvania, especially Pittsburgh, you get a lot of potholes. They're pretty bad, and they don't really fill it until spring. They'll get the real big ones for now, but generally in spring, late spring, once the snow and the salt trucks are all put away for the season, that's when they'll go out and fill the potholes, because they figure they're just not going to get They're not going to fill them, during the storm, during the winter season, because the scraper trucks will just lift that pothole right out of the ground. So why not just fill the pothole whenever, at the end of the season? But a lot of other things that people talk about is, going into Pittsburgh and going into their cultural district and just going into their restaurants. And Pittsburgh is known of more of like a movie type, sit down area, restaurant type movie making film in restaurants and things like that. And, my son Logan is now into movies, and, the lovely Kim and I usually go down and try to help out as much as we can. And we see this firsthand, Logan met Tom Hanks. He gave him a shout out, kind of waved, but I think he was actually taken back by that. His class all saw Tom Hanks when he was in town filming. And, it's not the only movie that they made, Mr. Rogers in Pittsburgh. That might have been the most recent one, but they made a lot of movies back in the day. I mean, come on, there were Perks of Being a Wallflower. There was Love and Other Drugs, just some of the things that, come off the top of my head. I remember seeing the Denora sign in Love and Other Drugs. That was kind of cool. I'm like, hey, I know exactly where that Denora sign is. It's right as soon as you go over the Menneson-Denora Bridge and you see that sign. So somewhere, somehow, somebody in Hollywood filmed that sign, which I thought was pretty cool. There, of course, was a lot of other movies made in the area, not necessarily in Pittsburgh. There was Striking Distance made in Menneson and, surrounding in Pittsburgh. That was another good one. I'm trying to think. There was Mothman Prophecies, Flashdance, Sudden Death, The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. That was one of my favorite ones. That was an oldie and a goodie back in the 70s. The Bridge to Nowhere, that was probably in the 60s. The Fault in Our Stars were probably within the last 10 years or so. I mean, Concussion was even filmed here. So as you could see, Pittsburgh has many attributes that you would like to go film a movie. I mean, you got water, you got bridges, you got boats, you got buses, you got transits, you got plenty of cars, the sceneries, the hillsides, the restaurants, the streets. I mean, it's basically a back lot of Hollywood. I mean, if you think about it, you can go in different blocks of Pittsburgh and you'll see different communities. You can go into, the South Side, or you could go into Little Italy. You can go into the Strip, and you could see so many different things of Pittsburgh. And it's almost like a backdrop of Hollywood. If you've ever gone through Universal Studios, Hollywood, and you've seen the backdrop, it kind of reminds you of Pittsburgh with the street and everything. So it doesn't surprise me that they come around here to film. One of my father-in-law, Doc's, favorite movies is Maria's Lover, and it was filmed at his alma mater in KLU. And can't think of the name of the restaurant at the top of the hill where they showed like the Horseshoe Bend. I want to say it's called like High Point or something like that. I'm not even sure if it's still open. I remember driving past it. I was never in there, but they did quite a lot of filming up there. So you do have a picturesque background, with all of our rivers and the bending of the rivers and the trees. And if you come at the right time, you'll get, the change of season leaves, which is going to just make the picture look beautiful. So depending when that movie was filmed, depending on the shots and how they did it, I'm sure it came out pretty nice. I will have to watch that movie at some point. But, Tom Cruise, one of my favorite actors, Jack Reacher, he was filming in Pittsburgh. So you got a lot of that stuff there. I mean, a lot of people was inspired to make movies when they come to Pittsburgh. So it doesn't surprise me that they come here at all to make these movies. With a lot of movies being made here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you'll see a lot more schools adding this to their curriculum. You'll see, filming, you'll see casting, you'll see some production, some classes that you could take in mainstream colleges that you don't really go there for cinematography or something like that. So a lot of these schools are offering classes like that, but there's a few specialty schools that do it. Like Logan goes to Point Park University, and, they are kind of like tops in their field for this. They're in a top echelon. So a lot of people go to school here, and then they find a job out in the industry, whether it's New York or Hollywood or what have you. I mean, I think Logan told me there was a couple people that ended up leaving school early because they had really cool jobs elsewhere. They could finish up their education out of state. So, and then there's people that go to school that he told me that just just want to get out of school and just go to Hollywood to see if they can make it work. But regardless, Pittsburgh is definitely up and coming just for all the movies. And, a lot of famous people came out of Pittsburgh as well, So it's definitely a place to be. It's growing in the field. And Pittsburgh is, I'd say, probably one of the top, I don't know, maybe top 5 to 10 places that people want to come and film. I think I did read that a while ago. So that's something definitely special with Western Pennsylvania. Can't talk about everything about Western Pennsylvania, or this podcast could go on for a lot longer than what I have it going now. But I'd love to hear what you like about Western Pennsylvania, and I'd like to hear about your roots and where you came from. Please respond and leave a comment below. And don't forget to tap the bell, subscribe, like, and all that. I'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for watching Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young.